The first thing I remember is the taste of salt and the sand. It was everywhere. My name is Ilara, and my world had shrunk to this single, lonely island. The wreckage of our small boat was a grim reminder on the reef. A skeleton picked clean by the waves. I was alone, utterly alone. The sun was a hammer in the sky, beating down on me. Dehydration is your first enemy out here. It will kill you faster than any beast. I had to find fresh water, and I had to find it fast. My throat was already a desert. Fear is natural, but you can't let it paralyze you. You have to take that fear and turn it into fuel. My survival checklist began to form in my mind. Water, shelter, fire, food, in that order. I stumbled away from the beach, pushing into the dense, unfamiliar jungle. The air was thick, humid, and alive with the buzzing of insects. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. I followed a gentle slope downwards, a good sign. Water always flows downhill. My ears strained, listening for the sound of a stream, a trickle, anything. I found a line of vibrant green ferns, greener than the rest of the foliage. That's a survivor's trick. Lush vegetation often points to a nearby water source. Hope, a tiny spark, ignited within me. The water was cool and clean. I drank slowly, letting my body absorb it. Never gulp it down, no matter how thirsty you are. That can make you sick. With the immediate threat of dehydration managed, my thoughts turned to shelter. Night would fall, and with it the temperature would drop. The jungle floor is no place to sleep unprotected. I needed to get off the ground, away from whatever crawled in the dark. I found a cluster of massive banyan trees, their roots like tangled arms creating natural alcoves. One spot, nestled between two thick roots, looked promising. It was a start. Finding a place to sleep is only half the battle. You have to make it safe. I gathered fallen palm fronds, weaving them together to create a rough, waterproof barrier above my chosen spot. I used my tattered dress to tie them in place. Then I collected dry leaves and moss to make a bed, insulating myself from the cold, damp ground. It wasn't a home, but it was a fortress against the elements. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, a profound sense of isolation washed over me. But I was alive. I had water and shelter. Day one was a victory. The first night was terrifying. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I didn't sleep much. At first light, my stomach growled, a fierce reminder of my next priority food. I had seen some brightly colored berries on my search for water, but I knew better. Bright colors in the wild often scream poison. A simple rule can save your life. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it. Instead, I returned to the beach. The ocean is a great provider if you know where to look. I searched the rock pools left by the receding tide, looking for trapped fish or crabs. My hunt was interrupted by a sound that froze my blood. It was a low growl, deep and guttural, coming from the edge of the jungle. I looked up and saw it. Stalking along the tree line was a wolf, but like no wolf I had ever seen or imagined. It was massive, with fur the color of ash, and from the center of its forehead grew a single, spiraling horn of polished bone. Its eyes, a piercing yellow, were locked onto me. This was not a normal predator. This was something else entirely. My heart hammered against my ribs. Fight or flight? In this case, fighting was not an option. I backed away slowly, never turning my back on the creature. You never run from a predator like that. It triggers their chase instinct. I kept my movements small and deliberate. My mind raced, searching for an escape. The wolf took a step forward, then another, its horn glinting in the morning sun. I remembered the banyan trees, my shelter. The roots were a maze, a tangle of wood and earth. An animal that large might struggle to navigate them. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. I needed a distraction. With a surge of desperate courage, I grabbed a piece of driftwood and hurled it as far as I could down the beach. The wolf's head snapped towards the sound, its attention momentarily diverted. That was my chance. I didn't run in a blind panic. I scrambled, moving with purpose, back towards the jungle and the relative safety of my makeshift camp. I squeezed through the narrow gaps between the banyan roots, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the beast crashing through the undergrowth behind me, but the tangled roots were doing their job. They slowed it down. I had escaped, for now. Days turned into a routine of survival. I learned to identify edible roots and catch small fish with a makeshift spear. I even managed to create fire using a piece of sharp flint and dry tinder. Fire was a game changer. It meant warmth, cooked food, and most importantly, a deterrent for predators. The one-horned wolf still patrolled the edges of my territory, its baleful howls echoing in the night, but it kept its distance from my crackling fire. I was becoming a survivor, adapting to this brutal new world. But this island had more than one monster hiding in its shadows. This new threat came from above. I was foraging for sweet yams near a rocky outcrop when I felt a sudden, unnatural stillness in the jungle. The birds went silent. The insects stopped buzzing. An ancient instinct screamed at me to look up. Draped across the thick branches of an ancient tree was a snake of impossible size. Its scales shimmered like obsidian, and coiled on its massive head were two curved horns like those of a ram. It was a horned python, a creature of myth, and it was watching me with unblinking, intelligent eyes. Its sheer scale was mind-boggling. It could have swallowed me whole without effort. Unlike the wolf, the python was not an aggressive hunter. It was an ambush predator. It would wait for its prey to come to it. My heart was a drum, but I knew that sudden movements would trigger its strike. I had to become part of the scenery to seem as non-threatening as a rock or a bush. I stayed completely still, my muscles screaming in protest. The snake's head swiveled slowly, its forked tongue tasting the air, sensing my heat, my scent. We were locked in a terrifying standoff, a silent battle of wills between a girl and a living legend. I remembered something my father once told me about snakes. They have poor eyesight but are incredibly sensitive to vibrations and heat. The fire. My fire was back at my camp, but the principle was the same. Fire is heat, a signal of danger to most creatures. I very, very slowly reached for the two pieces of flint I now carried with me everywhere. My movements were glacial. With painstaking care, I struck them together near a pile of dry moss. A tiny spark caught, a wisp of smoke rose. The python sensed the change immediately. The sudden plume of heat and smoke was unnatural. Its massive head pulled back, wary and confused. It was the opening I needed to retreat, step by silent step, back into the safety of the known jungle. Surviving the wolf and the python taught me a critical lesson. Brute force was not the answer here. My strength was not in my muscles, but in my mind. The wolf was a creature of aggression and instinct. I defeated it with misdirection and by using the terrain to my advantage. The python was a patient, silent hunter. I evaded it by understanding its nature and using my knowledge of fire. Each encounter, each terrifying moment, was a harsh but effective teacher. I was no longer just a lost girl, I was a strategist, I was a survivor. My fear was still there, a constant companion, but now it was joined by a growing confidence. I began to map the island in my head. I knew which areas belonged to the wolf and which belonged to the python. I learned the patterns of the tides, the locations of the best fruit trees, and the safest paths through the jungle. My small shelter by the banyan trees became a true camp. I built a higher, more secure sleeping platform and a small, fenced-in area to store food away from scavengers. I was not just surviving day to day anymore. I was planning for the future. I was building a life in the heart of danger, proving that human ingenuity could overcome even mythical threats. One morning, I stood on the highest cliff of the island. watching the sun rise over the endless ocean. The air was clean, and from this vantage point, the island looked almost beautiful, its dangers hidden beneath the lush green canopy. I thought about the girl who had washed ashore weeks ago, terrified and alone. She was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had faced down monsters and won. I had not been rescued, not yet, but I no longer waited for a ship in despair. I was the master of my own survival. The island had taken everything from me, but it had also given me something in return, an unbreakable will. It taught me that bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what you need to do anyway. It's about looking a one-horned wolf in the eye and choosing to think, not to panic. As I watched a distant seabird soar on the morning thermals, a single, powerful thought filled my mind. I will survive this. I will get home, and I will never, ever give up. The island had forged me into something new, and I was ready for whatever came next.